whether it's the oldest US business school or the first MBA program, certainly the Wharton School has built an extraordinary reputation for itself in the last 130, 40 years. So it's great to be able to sit down with my co-director at Wharton Admissions, Judith Hodara. Judith was at UPenn for 11 years and with the Wharton School as acting director of admissions. Judith, it's a school that you love.
Yes, it is. And I should tell you, it was founded in 1888.
There we go. We can do the GMAT math from there, right?
Yeah. Claim to fame was being the oldest business school in the United States. So glad to be with you today, Matt. And it is a school that I'm very, very connected to still, having, as you said, served on the admissions committee for 11 years and really feel compelled to share what I know about the school, the students that go there, and the wonderful community that it has been since then.
Right. Now, of course, you were drowned in thousands of applications every year, and you blush whenever you think of just how many of those applications that you read. So as you look through all of that and this tremendous sort of diversity that you're trying to bring into the class, if we really drill down, what do you think are the fundamentals that Wharton is looking for in an MBA candidate?
Without a doubt, Wharton is really based on teamwork, and you know that from everything they talk about as they share who they are with the world, through the interview process, which, as many of you know, is the team-based discussion. So Wharton fundamentally is really an organization, a school, an environment that thrives on that intersection. So from the very beginning, you're part of a cohort, you're part of a cluster, you're part of your year. So lots of different ways that your engagement with the school is really sliced and diced. Your fundamental team is called a learning team. That's 5 or 6 individuals randomly selected that are going to be with you throughout the duration of your first year. So love them or hate them, you figure out how to work with them, that's for sure. And that's something that I think is really a hallmark of the first year experience at Wharton. So without a doubt, I would say that teamwork, a #1 priority. And then really the sense that has been growing so much through the past dean, through the current dean, Dr. Erica James, is the sense of making a mark in the world that is also going to leave the world better than you found it, right? So there's not just, okay, well, what job am I going to get when I graduate? How am I going to, revolutionize the banking industry or the consulting industry? But what is it that I really care about deeply, and how can I bring that out into the communities that I'm a part of when I graduate? And I think that admittedly that has changed over the past 2 decades, where perhaps Wharton was very well known for being, a place that had a lot of finance, a lot of consultants kind of going out into those industries. But now the impetus and the thought process that goes into the classroom work, exercises, experiential learning is really based on how are you going to take your skills and really drive home that message to the broader community when you leave.
Right, because if we go back 13, 14 years, pre-Lehman Brothers, pre-financial crisis, and Wharton, among a number of schools that were routinely placing anywhere sort of between 45 and 50% of the class into financial services, and yet, Wharton they have more electives than any other business school on the planet. And, you've talked about whether it's healthcare, real estate, retail, innovation and technology, this fantastic new incubator that they have. I mean, do you often think, well, sometimes people just don't know the real Wharton, or they've pigeonholed it to finance, and yet there's so much else that's going on?
Yeah, I would agree with you. I feel like a lot of the work that I did was saying Wharton is not just finance. I think that everybody has in their head this tagline that may still be a hangover from 20 years ago. Harvard does this, Stanford does this, and Wharton was the finance school. Admittedly, it's an hour and 20 minutes via Amtrak to New York City. There's going to be a lot of people that are interested in banking and finance, but there's also all these other amazing concentrations. And it's not just an elective of like 2 courses per concentration. And we're talking like very, very deep aviation, manufacturing, family business, all these things. You're like, wow, I had no idea. And I have to tell you, Matt, I worked there, and for the first year, I had no idea. So it was just getting a sense of who was doing what, exciting faculty and what they were talking about. Certainly, just an example, this year, they now have hired a faculty member that only works on diversity and inclusion in organizations, right? So really looking at what is going on in the world today, what are the topics that are of interest, and making sure that the academic environment is really focusing on I should say, not just finance, but in addition to finance, all of these other areas of expertise.
So it's a school, of course, that attracts individuals with, strong academic records, the average GPA of around 3.6, strong GMAT and GRE test scores, and certainly the quant section of that test. So how do you then stand out and show that motivate? Could you really tell when someone was truly motivated by Wharton and the school, its culture?
Yeah, I think that it comes from really taking the time. And I talk about this a lot. Learning about a school is a lot like learning a foreign language, right? You need to build that vocabulary. So it's not just in today's pandemic world, watching a webinar. It is reaching out to current students that are interested in the same things that you are, talking to people that graduated 5 years ago and 10 years ago, following faculty online. You may not ever speak with that particular faculty member, but you kind of know what the research is that they're doing. So it's absorbing the nature of what the school is, and how that possibly could be a good fit for you. Right. So I will tell you that I could tell easily when reviewing applications, on the other side of the admissions desk, when someone had just kind of done a surface skim. They were throwing in things easy, grab that from the website. Yes, there's a pub on Thursday. Yes, Wildman play hockey on Sunday nights with beer, like that I got. But then you could always tell the people that were willing to peel back the layers, go another level deeper, and really look at why this was going to be a good fit. What were they bringing and what were they getting? So now, where we sit now and work with students, that's very much something that we really encourage and expect that you're going to take the time to not just, skim, but to really understand how do you see yourself in that particular community.
Right. Yes, I always think with this sort of dream team of Wharton at Fortuna, but Michelle and Brittany and Jen and Curtis and I miss you, Julie, and the fact that you're actually reading applications to be able to get a sense of that energy, that authenticity, and how that would translate. And you've often said one of the joys of your work at the school was to craft that diversity and think about those learning groups or how this individual is going to interact with others that's so different. You sort of see that as a great reward of the position that you had at the school?
Without a doubt. And that, we were never really told you can only have X number of people that do this or X number of people that do that. So when you were looking at applications, you would sort of start with, okay, well, what is the industry? But everybody is much more than what they do for a living. I'd be hard pressed to say that person only does X. And sometimes when I'm talking to students now, I say, okay, so you just introduced yourself. You told me what you do on a daily basis, but like, what are some of the things that encourage you to pursue this path? Or who are the people that influenced you? What was that teacher in 12th grade that really got you thinking about these things? And so everyone that comes to work with us at Fortuna, and again, going back now to Wharton, people that I was looking at their profiles, they were such a complicated, beautiful, presentation of what was going on and what were the influences that had gotten them there. So that was the joy of crafting these classes, was that we were really given a lot of leeway in terms of how we thought that individuals would work well together, with that learning team always in mind. Sticking 6 people in a room, what happens? And so that I think gave us a lot of creativity and bringing in people that maybe on paper didn't seem like an obvious match, or had a very, very different background or different kinds of exposures. And that's what made it really exciting.
And as all of you and the sort of the committee stage, what would you remember? Because of course, whether it's the school that you went to, the McKinsey, Goldman, Google, BlackRock credentials that you have, was it sometimes something quite beyond those sort of parameters that's why that person would really stand out in your collective?
I would, it's those stories that we would go home and anonymously talk about, with one another in the hallways. You remember the people that you're kind of banging the table for at 11:30 at night, which was frequently the case. We were there pretty late at night. There was a great Chinese restaurant across the road that we probably owe a great debt of gratitude to for keeping us fueled all those late nights. But I do think that it is really those individuals that were willing to share with themselves, that were willing to say, yeah, it hasn't always been perfect. I haven't, this job that I have, it's really long hours and it's not giving me the kind of time that I want to be able to be involved with extracurriculars. But these are the kinds of things that I might want to do if I had the opportunity. Or, I really struggled with mental health in college, like not being afraid to be personal and to be imperfect. And I know that sounds like a crazy thing for individuals that may be watching this video, like, wow, I'm allowed to show a little bit of insecurity or lack of confidence. That's what schools are looking for, because that's the real deal, right? That nugget, that moment where you're very true to yourself is really what can help schools to get to know you.
And with all the so many hundreds of successful Fortuna clients, if you were to then identify one aspect of the admissions process, we've got a couple of minutes before we wrap up, what would you sort of single in on that you think either is a challenge or can be done particularly well? What would that be?
So the Wharton recommendation letters are tough because they're really different than the other Harvard. If you look at the other M7 schools, many of them have the same question. How do you know this person? How do they compare to others? What's some constructive criticism? Wharton, a couple of years ago, decided to kind of go off on their own path. Similar, but not exactly same question. How do you think this individual will find success in the classroom? And how do you think that they'll find it professionally? It is admittedly the question that I spend a lot of time on with clients and students who are unsure about how to approach it, and their recommenders are unsure how to approach it. Do I talk about their quantitative aptitude? Do I talk about their ability to get projects done? How do I talk about academic success? So what I really look at is, at Wharton, academics has a lot to do with teamwork and a lot to do with interaction with an informal leadership and leading from within and not being in the front and not necessarily being in the middle. But so to me, that is really helping the recommenders understand that very nuanced question. It is a little misleading. I think Wharton could probably do a better job of wording it, because it's not just about the nuts and bolts of how are they going to perform on this test, but really what are those interplays when they're in the classroom and then working in learning teams and working on group projects. So that to me is a little bit of a tricky one. And the same thing goes for, in industry. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be a leader in their field, but that they're going to be someone who is impactful whatever they decide to do. So I would say the questions themselves are not difficult per se, but they require extra attention and a word to the wise. It's not the kind of thing that you can just flip what you've done for other schools and insert it. Right. It is going to require a little bit more sort of massaging of the message.
Yeah, got it. Well, of course, whether the Wharton, other M7 schools that you're looking at, the recommenders that you're thinking about, the vulnerability that you're wondering, how you could best share in the application with Judith and all of our team at Fortuna, do reach out to us to share your stories, get our insider expertise and advice about your chances applying to Wharton and these other fantastic business schools. Thanks for following this video, Judith. Thanks for such great advice.
Thank you. Always a pleasure. See you again soon.